there is no doubt at all that this is a much more emotional, fraught, politically divisive issue in America than it is in Britain, and indeed in most of the Western world, where the debate on abortion has, for vast majority of people and politicians, been fairly settled as something that is not a good thing, but it's often the least worst thing, and something that women should be legally entitled to in safe surroundings for them up to a certain period of time. And that's largely settled, give or take over a few weeks here and there, largely settled. In America, much more fraught. Why do you think that is?
I think it's because in Britain it's been pretty depoliticised. It's largely regarded as a kind of health thing. Women need it because contraception doesn't always work and we don't always use it properly. In the United States, it's just had a really different sense where abortion's become a kind of symbol of the culture wars. Women who have abortions, women who advocate for abortions are seen often by Republicans as those nasty women that Trump talked about.
They're bad people.
They are bad people.
Yeah, it is very interesting, that, isn't it? And the key thing here is that the argument we're hearing from, I mean, there's no doubt at all, Trump getting elected, first time, well, only time round, but he did not get re-elected. Someone needs to break this to Donald, by the way. But Donald Trump getting elected, a lot of this was based on the support from the evangelical Christian right, which are huge campaigners and huge funders. There aren't that many of them, but they can be absolutely crucial in deciding elections in terms of their funding, in terms of ads for campaigners and ads against attack ads against those who don't support their policy. And they wanted him in. They were very lucky. They saw two Supreme Court justices die where they were able to get Trump appointees, and they are full-on Christian evangelical supporters of that conservative project. So I don't think anyone was really in any doubt that this Supreme Court ruling would, once given, was going to come down on the side of limiting the right of abortion. What would be the practical reality of this? Because it's a constitutional right, but this means it's going to be up to the state legislators to decide. Some could say, actually, this is a more democratic decision. And if the vast majority of people in America, as we're told, do believe that women should have the right to abortion, surely that means that these rights will be enshrined by elections, no?
Well, it really is one of those kind of complicated things. And very often I would always find myself really wanting things to be decided by the people. You think about the way it worked in the south of Ireland, that was absolutely the best way for that to go.
Having a referendum on the issue.
Having a referendum on the issue absolutely was the best way to go. But what's going on here, I think, is a little bit different, because what's going on here is not just an attack on abortion rights, which you could put to that kind of vote. In undermining this interpretation of the Constitution, it's really saying that you get a bigger state, that the state has the opportunity to interfere in decisions that were previously personal. Because the reason why the Constitution said that abortion should be there for a woman was because it said that there were certain matters that were private decisions, matters about a woman's body, matters about the number of children she should have in her family. And so basically, in attacking that interpretation of that article, it really does make a case for big state, which is peculiar because it's not what you'd think the Republicans would be.
No, indeed. I tell you what I find fascinating is all the people who, on both sides of the argument, who talk about bodily autonomy, and many on the sort of Democrat side saying bodily autonomy, women have a right to decide what happens to their bodies. Well, didn't seem to think that when it came to vaccine mandates, and those on the right and the Republican, they're insisting that bodily autonomy is absolutely crucial, and yet quite happy to interfere whether or not a woman has to carry an unwanted unborn child. In terms of the issues here, though, I mean, I'm always fascinated by the number of people who claim their biggest concern is the murder of unborn children, how terrible it is. And yet they don't seem to be very concerned about making sure women have access to free and safe contraception. Surely, if the simplest, easiest way of cutting the number of abortions, and I think largely that should be something we should aim to do. I think it would be a really good thing if women didn't have abortions, but only really because they weren't pregnant when they didn't want to be. seem to me to be the answer. And surely that
yeah.
means we should focus on contraception. And yet the people who are so anti-abortion rarely seem to mention contraception. Does that suggest their issue isn't the unborn child and it is more about just controlling women or punishing women for having sex?
I think it definitely shows that they're not interested in women. And I think that what we need to do is to turn the discussion much more to what is a very, very real thing, which is the effect that pregnancy has on women, which is why I think it's important to constantly be thinking about how immoral it is to force a woman to have a pregnancy that she doesn't want to carry, and that assault on her. But, you know, the other thing is, you're dead right. It's no woman's ambition to be sitting in an abortion clinic. Those women are miserable women, but they're often there because contraception doesn't work. I mean, by that, I mean it doesn't work all the time. It has a high failure rate. And if we want to be able to plan our families, we do need abortion to be there as a backup.
Yeah. And there's this idea that women, these sort of, you know, irresponsible women getting drunk, having unprotected sex with, you know, random men. That's simply not, because I know a number of women who actually, you know, in their 30s in long-term committed relationships have had abortions, and they've had abortions because you know, their family was complete. They didn't have the money. One of them had just lost their job. They couldn't afford to have another child.
Exactly.
You know, and many different reasons that women have abortions, which are totally ignored by those who campaign on this issue.
Exactly. Half of the women that we saw at BPAS, that we see at BPAS, already are married with families. They have children already. The myth of the feckless youngster is absolutely...
And even if they were so feckless over that, it's probably not a good idea for them to bring a child into the world either. It is extraordinary to have this debate, and always ends up being about irresponsible women as opposed to looking at the healthcare needs. And again, we know if women don't get access to legal abortions, we know what happens in the countries where there isn't access. They get illegal abortions, they get unsafe backstreet abortions, and women die. And apparently these people care less about real women who actually already exist on this planet than they do care less about them than they do about unborn babies, fetuses, even embryos. Really good to talk to you, Anne Frady,